This is how you put 9 eggs and 2 sticks of butter on one plate. Hey everyone, it's Kenji. Today we're going to make some eggs Benedict for a crowd. So eggs Benedict, it's the most efficient way to get lots of eggs and butter into your system without feeling like you're getting a lot of eggs and butter into your system. However, it is also a little bit difficult to make, especially if you're going to be doing it for a bunch of people, because you got to poach eggs. Poaching eggs can be a little tricky. You got to make Hollandaise. That can be tricky on its own. And then keeping the Hollandaise warm, you can't really make Hollandaise in advance and reheat it. So all of it becomes a little bit difficult to do. I'm going to show you some tricks to make it easier. So the first thing we're going to do is poach our eggs, which seems like it should be the last thing you do. But we're going to do it first, and I'll show you why. So what you want relatively fresh eggs. Well, first I want to show you what an egg looks like, right? I mean, you all know what an egg looks like, but let's crack this egg. Put it in the bowl here. So what you're going to see when you crack an egg, if you look closely, you can see obviously there's the yolk, right? And then there's the white, but the white is actually divided into two parts. There's this kind of tight white that forms that, it's all encapsulated in like a little membrane, and then there's this loose white, this kind of watery stuff over here. Now, the issue when you poach eggs is that this loose white can get into your water and cloud it all up. And the thing is that the older your egg is, the more of that loose white you're going to have, and the weaker the membrane of the egg. So what you want when you're poaching eggs is you want pretty fresh eggs. The way that you tell how fresh your eggs are, first of all, like if you can get it straight out of the cloaca in your backyard, that's better, or your neighbor's backyard. But if you're buying them from the supermarket, what you want to do, you got to look at this really tiny number here. You're not looking at the sell-by date. What you're looking for is this 3-digit number. It'll be anywhere from 001 to 365 from January 1st to December 31st. That's the Julian calendar date, or someone will correct me and tell me what the real number, like Gregorian, whatever it is. It's the number of the day of the year that it is. And so you're looking for the highest number. That's going to be the day that the eggs were packed. It's not a perfect indication, because eggs, at least in the U.S., eggs legally can be sitting in the coop for up to 30 days before they go into the package. But it's a pretty good indication. That generally doesn't happen because farmers don't want to leave their eggs hanging around. So generally, that's going to be a good indication of when the egg was laid. This number was 277, so that means these were packed on October 4th, which today is October 23rd, so that was 19 days ago. These eggs are 19 days old. Is that right? 25th today. So, okay, sorry. So what does that make it? 21 days old. Something like that? Am I right? Yeah, 21 minus 4 is 20. 25 minus 4 is 1. Okay. Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Lena. 21 days old. Seems like it's old, but eggs actually stay fresh for quite a long time. So the sell-by date on an egg, it's allowed to be up to 30 days past the packing date. And then they're actually going to be good for a long time after that. You really do want to find sort of the freshest ones you can, though. All right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break them all into a bowl like this. Okay. Make sure that they are not... Make sure that they're not cracked. Sorry. And as I go, so what I'm going to do, that loose white, that's what's going to cause problems. So I'm going to try and get rid of that loose white. So I'm just going to take a strainer and carefully put the eggs into it. And what you'll see is that those loose whites are all going to drain out, but the thicker membranes, the part that's inside the membranes, are going to stay, right? Which is what we want. So what I'll do is I'll just break these eggs one at a time, just to make sure that I don't accidentally break a yolk. Okay. Slip it in here. I've got these eggs. They've drained nicely. This is all that sort of liquidy white that we're just going to get rid of. We can save it to make like an omelet, whatever you want, feed it to the dog. And I'll put my eggs back into a bowl like this. All right. And so over here, I've got water. All this is just plain water. I'm going to add a little bit of salt to it. I'm not going to add any vinegar to my water. Sometimes you'll see people add vinegar to their water for poaching eggs. It's not really necessary. It can change the flavor of the eggs, first of all, and it can also change the texture of the eggs. It gives them a sort of almost chalky texture to them. Under a simmer right now, so I let it come up to a simmer, reduce the temperature just until it's still. So you can see like maybe faint bubbles coming out there, but you don't really want a heavy boil. I'm going to give it a little bit of a swirl, just a little bit of a swirl, and then I will slowly slip my eggs in. All right. Now, as the eggs are cooking, I'm not going to give it like a heavy swirl. I just want to keep them moving just a little bit. The idea is that I don't want them to stick to the bottom of the pan. I want all the sides to cook via um, just the water. You know, I don't want any of the cooking to happen via contact with the pan. And keeping it swirling, keeping it moving like that is how you're going to get that. Sometimes people will give it more of a vigorous swirl, and that'll get you sort of a more, you know, real torpedo-shaped egg. But that's not what I'm going for here. I just want nice little sacks, you know. By the way, I just did 6 eggs there. I've done the same method with, you know, 30 eggs at a time. I think I've done it now with up to 4 dozen, 48 eggs within a really big strainer. Sometimes when you do it that way, you'll find you'll lose some eggs here and there. Some of them, the yolks might pop out. But you know, eggs, as long as you're gentle with them, they you can do virtually as many as you want at the same time. So yeah, sometimes folks might think that if you put all the eggs in a strainer like that, aren't they just going to stick together? Well, the answer is obviously no. They don't stick together because eggs really are like sort of water balloons, you know, like they're balloons filled with protein and water, mostly water and some amount of protein and fat, and some other, you know, minerals, emulsifiers, things like that, lecithin. But they don't stick together. They will remain completely separate from each other. So, you know, eggs are essentially like water balloons, and the membrane is a little bit porous, so some of that liquid can get in and out, and that's why, you know, over time you end up with more of the sort of loose whites. But they don't stick together in the same way that a basket full of water balloons wouldn't stick together. All right, so these have been in here a couple minutes. You know, about 3 minutes is what you're going for a soft poached egg, but you can really use your eyes. All right, so these are, I would say that's pretty much done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out and put it into this ice bath over here. All of them came out pretty good, which is not normal. Normally, when I do this on camera, like at least a couple of them mess up. You know, I used to work at a restaurant where I made brunch and would have to make tons and tons of hollandaise and poached eggs. So this technique is one that really I started working on then and came in really handy. So now that we've got our eggs in an ice bath, we can actually do all of this up to a couple days in advance. These eggs are going to be just fine. You can just store them straight in the fridge in water in a sealed container, and they're going to hold for a couple days. So you can do, you know, you can have brunch for 50 people, and every one of them could have a poached egg that you cook in advance, and it's going to come out perfect, stress-free on the day of. So I'm going to hold those to the side. In the meantime, we're going to make our hollandaise. So to make hollandaise, what we've got. So sorry. Now we're going to make our hollandaise. So a hollandaise is essentially it's kind of like a warm mayonnaise. So mayonnaise is an emulsion. An emulsion is basically when you have two things that normally are not miscible when you make them when you make a mix. So in this case, in most culinary cases, it's going to be fat and water that you're combining together. So in the case of mayonnaise, your liquid is going to be mostly coming from egg yolks. Egg yolks are mostly water, some amount of fat and emulsifiers and their protein in there as well. But your liquid is mainly coming from egg yolks, a little bit of vinegar or lemon juice, depending on how you like to make your mayonnaise. And then your fat's going to be oil. And the way you do it is that you slowly introduce your fat into the liquid. The way I like to think of it is my daughter is in kindergarten right now. Okay, in her class, there's 2 classes. When you have these 2 classes, whenever they have like parties and stuff, the class members all know each other really well. So if you just suddenly drop them into the room together, they end up dividing themselves into 2 distinct groups naturally. Even if you mix them up, they'll eventually sort of separate themselves into 2 groups again. And that's what happens when you try and mix oil and water. It's like the water molecules know each other really well. Oil molecules know each other really well, and they like to bond together. And so when you have water and oil mix, they end up separating. However, what happens is if you were to take, say, like 1 or 2 students from one group and introduce them to the other crowd, then what happens is that they can slowly make friends. Maybe they'll get surrounded by a group of the other things. And so when you add them slowly, you can actually end up coming up with a group that is more intermixed and actually stays mixed that way because they get to know each other a little better. They end up holding hands. And that's the same thing that you want to do when you're introducing a fat to a liquid if you're going to make a stable emulsion. So you want to introduce the fat very slowly so that you can break the fat molecules up into very, very small droplets that then get surrounded by water molecules. And that way they don't interact, the fat molecules don't coalesce and separate out. When you're doing mayonnaise, the key is to really drizzle it in slowly. In fact, when you're doing hollandaise also, the key is to take your egg yolks. In the case of hollandaise, it's going to be melted butter. You would very, very slowly whisk in your melted butter so that it really gets to know the egg yolks as you're adding it in. It's difficult to do, and I remember the very first time I tried to make hollandaise, I was reading about it from a book, and it's really hard to learn how to make hollandaise from a book, and I completely failed. It just ended up as this like greasy, buttery thing with like half scrambled egg yolks inside. The technique I'm going to use today, I think, solves a lot of those problems. It makes everything a lot easier. So I'm going to start 3 egg yolks. Oops. Let's grab these. We'll do this the old dirty way. 3 egg yolks. Come on. Whoop. All right, 3 egg yolks. We're going to do some lemon juice. About a tablespoon or so of lemon juice. I'm using the old hand strainer here. They're called hands because they're handy. And then a little bit of water. About a tablespoon also. Some salt. And now, if you want, you could add a little bit of cayenne pepper in there. If you're Chef John from YouTube, you would add a little cayenne pepper. I'm going to do a little pinch of Aleppo. It doesn't really need any kind of pepper or anything like that. Really, you can get away with just egg yolks, lemon juice, and butter. And so I stick into this container. The key is I'm going to use a hand blender here. You can use a regular blender as well, but I find a hand blender to be easier. The key is that you want to find a container that just fits the head of the hand blender. So you don't want something really wide. You want the head of the blender to fill up the whole thing. So generally, the container that came with the hand blender is going to be your best option. I've worked in so many restaurants where they have these hand blenders and the cables end up burning on the edges of the pan. So I'm like trying to be hyper vigilant about that. And what we're going to do is I've got this butter. All I've done is melt it. Right. So butter, it's about 81 to 83% fat, about like 9 to 10% water, and then the rest is going to be protein. What we want to do is mainly keep the fat. Some of that protein you can keep if you want, like the scum on the top. Some people will tell you to skim that off. If you're doing like a true clarified butter, you would skim that scum off. But I actually don't mind having the scum. I think it adds a little bit of flavor. I don't think it really affects the texture. What you do want to leave off, though, is this kind of white, is the liquid at the bottom. Having too much liquid in there will turn your Hollandaise really thin. So once you get to about this point, just stop pouring. And so you're left with mainly sort of like the milk solids and water down in the bottom of the pot there. That's the part that you don't really want to use. You can I don't know what you could do with it. You could probably add it to your bread dough and do make like challah or something with it. Brioche. All right, so I've got my butter, I've got my hand blender. You want to make sure that the head of your blender is fully immersed down at the bottom here. And we're going to start running it. And with the blender running, we're going to slowly drizzle our butter in. I'm going to actually kind of let it run down the neck of the blender. Woo! I've never seen a blender do that. All right, well, let's add a little bit of extra butter first, and let's get a little more liquid in there. And hopefully this will still work. So the idea is that you want to incorporate the butter slowly enough that it emulsifies. All right, I think we're going to hit that point. Looking good. And drizzle it down in there. And the vortex of the blender is going to pull that butter in slowly enough that it should, if all goes right, it should form a stable emulsion. And of course, I call this foolproof Hollandaise, but really anything is only ever fool resistant, especially when it's on camera. Looks like we're doing good. So you can see an emulsion is always going to be thicker than either of the elements on its own. So mayonnaise is going to be thicker than egg yolks or oil on their own. Hollandaise is going to be thicker than egg yolks or butter on their own. So if your emulsion is not looking thick, if it's looking kind of watery or it's looking kind of greasy or runny, that's a sign that it's not forming properly and you should stop and start over. All right, once you have a pretty stable emulsion going, you should be able to kind of dump in the rest of the liquid right at the end. All right, there's our Hollandaise. You can see how nice and thick and creamy it is. That's what you're looking for. Okay, now the final step for our eggs Benedict is to first clean up all the eggs that went flying around. All right, so I'm going to start my Canadian bacon frying. Canadian bacon is the traditional choice for eggs Benedict. Let me get a little oil in there. Canadian bacon is not actually Canadian. It's not actually a thing that exists in Canada, but it is based on a thing called pea meal bacon, which is a pork loin that's been cured, coated in cornmeal, and then sliced like that. The stuff we get in the U.S. doesn't have the cornmeal, so it's not true pea meal. All right, so our Hollandaise is done. All I'm going to do with this Hollandaise, I got a pot of warm, not quite boiling, but pretty hot water here, and I'm just going to pop my thing right like that, and that'll keep it just warm enough that what the problem with Hollandaise is that if it cools down, the butter solids will start to solidify again, and that will break the emulsion. So Hollandaise, it always has to stay above the melting temperature of butter. So just above body temperature should be fine. But you don't want to boil it because then you'll cook the egg yolks. But you want it just to be around 100 degrees Fahrenheit or so. 40 degrees Celsius will do you. All right, so we're going to cook our Canadian bacon now. The last couple elements of the thing going on. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, I'm going to start my my English muffins toasting. So these are English muffins I got from Temple Pastries here in Seattle. I think some of the best English muffins you can get. These ones, so normally if I was making a breakfast sandwich, I would cut them with a knife. If I'm going to be eating the English muffin on its own, or if I'm going to be making eggs Benedict, where I really want the texture of the nooks and crannies, where I'm going to be toasting it as opposed to sort of cooking in a pan, I will fork it. Otherwise, I don't fork with my English muffins. So I fork them all the way around. There you go. All right. So English muffins, I'm going to pop them into my, I got a magic toaster in the closet. I'm on a boat, so there's not much room for things. Let those toast. Meanwhile, we're going to cook our Canadian bacon. A little oil in the pan. A little oil in the pan. Some slices of Canadian bacon. So Canadian bacon, Canadian bacon is cured pork loin. So regular American style, streaky bacon, as they would call it in England and the UK. American style bacon is pork belly. Canadian bacon is cured pork loin that has been tied into a nice round shape like this. It's called Canadian bacon, although it's not really something you'd find in Canada. It originates from a thing called pea meal bacon, which is a Canadian thing. Pea meal bacon is pork loin that's been cured and then coated in cornmeal, and it's a sort of similar texture and flavor to this. That's where Canadian bacon comes from, but Canadian bacon is actually sort of a purely American thing. All right, so we're just going to let that fry up on both sides. I got it down with these. I know because people are always asking in the comments. These are chef's presses. My buddy Bruce Hill in the Bay Area, he makes these and sells them. You can find them at chefspress.com or follow the Chef's Press on Instagram or wherever you get your social media needs. I find him super useful for a lot of things, and he's not paying me to say that. All right, I'm gonna sear my bacon off on both sides. To be honest, I don't really often make eggs Benedict. And when I do, I generally don't use Canadian bacon. I generally prefer regular bacon or regular ham, or sometimes I like it with Spam. What I really should have done today, I really like it with sort of thick sliced bologna from the deli. Fried bologna is good. You can call it mortadella if you want to sound fancy. My English muffins, by the way, if I'm making something like a breakfast sandwich, I do like to split them in half with a knife so that they have a smooth surface so I can griddle them. And the reason I like to do that is because with my breakfast sandwiches, I would prefer, I like to get that sort of steamy, what I call the cosmic oneness in the sandwich. Whereas with eggs Benedict, there's already these kind of really creamy elements going on. There's the eggs and the Hollandaise sauce. And so the English muffin I find almost to be a textural element. So I really want those nooks and crannies and the crispy bits in the English muffin when I'm making eggs Benedict. All right, we're down to our final stretch here. We got our Canadian bacon ready to go. We got our Hollandaise ready to go. You might notice that our eggs are still cold. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pop them straight into that same pan of warm water. Or if you feel you want to be like, more hygienic, whatever, you can pour some hot water out of a kettle over them, like out of a tea kettle. And those are just going to sit in there, and they will warm up as if you had just cooked them. Let me go check my English muffins, and we can start to assemble. Alrighty. So, English muffin, muffin. I'm gonna get my Hollandaise. I'll start with just a teeny bit of the Hollandaise underneath, just to moisten that muffin a little. You gotta get something into those crooks and nannies, nooks and crannies. All right, a little bit of Hollandaise. Get our eggs on there. You want to be gentle with them because they are very, very soft and tender. Whoop. Unlike that. It's okay. Hollandaise is really good at covering up mistakes. What's up, Jen? Dog's getting hungry. All right. Oh man, I screwed this all up. What'd I do? I forgot the bacon, huh? That's all right. We'll just do some adjusting on the fly. It's fine. You see, the thing about messing up is that everybody does it, and you just got to be okay with it. Even if I wasn't able to take these eggs off and slide the ham underneath, would not have been the end of the world. I could put the ham on top, and you could come up with a new name for it. Like Julia Child style. Just come up and call it egg, instead of eggs Benedict, you call it eggs Dick-a-Ben. God, that's terrible. And you're good. All right. So a good Hollandaise, you can see how it's kind of like, it's thick, it's creamy, it's almost like frothy, and what it should do when you put it on an egg is it should coat it like that. If it starts to run off and you like sort of see the the egg white underneath, you should be able to what the consistency is called nappe in French. Like it should nap everything. It should coat it like a blanket. You want your Hollandaise to be like a nice warm buttery blanket. There you go. This is how you put 9 eggs and 2 sticks of butter on one plate. Finally, we'll garnish it. Just a touch more of those Aleppo flakes. I got some sliced chives here. Dog is getting real hungry. And there you go. So this is, I did 5 here. You can really easily do as many as you want. The only things that you have to do last minute are toast the English muffins and cook the Canadian bacon. And if you're skipping the Canadian bacon, if you're doing something like smoked salmon, spinach, or whatever, then it becomes even easier. All you really have to do at the last minute is toast the English muffins, because the eggs you can do in advance. The Hollandaise you could do the morning of and just store it like I did there in a pot of hot water. If you're going to store it for a couple hours even, you can just replenish that water every once in a while to make sure that it stays nice and warm. But otherwise, the poached eggs you do in advance, it all becomes real easy, which is I guess good for your brunch parties, not good for the butter industry, good for your guests. I think good for everyone. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with eating too much Hollandaise. Well, there's stuff wrong with eating too much of anything, but there's nothing wrong with eating a little Hollandaise now and then. All right, let's should we poke it and see what we got? This one here? All right. Yeah. Let me rotate you to an angle where I know we're going to get like a little Egg yolk burst. All right, here we go. Oof, look at that. It's like a sauce for your sauce. I don't know if I showed it on camera, but I did taste the Hollandaise before I put it on here just to make sure that there was enough acid, enough salt. You always want to taste your sauces. Well, taste everything you can. It's a classic for a reason. The dog really wants some. You want to, here, Chen, come over here. You can have some. All right. You want a little bit, Chen? Sorry, there's a dog tax that must be paid. Oh, you can sit down a little more. Yeah, good boy. All right. It is a classic for a reason. The reason is butter. Yeah, so I'm going to eat this. I might eat another one and then another one after that. And Eggs Benedict for a crowd. It's much easier than it seems, and it'll impress your friends, I guess, if that's what you want to do. Impress your enemies. Invite your enemies and make them feel bad for not being able to make Eggs Benedict for you. Impress them with your niceness. All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals, I'll see you next time.